Let's talk about love bombing today and how attachment can come into play whenever we're talking about love bombing. Leslie Wells, Connection Coach. I help individuals heal, thrive, improve, repair, and connect more deeply in their romantic relationships by looking at things through an attachment lens. So typically when we hear the term love bombing, we tend to think of like narcissist or narcissistic personality disorder or individuals who are abusive. And that's because it typically has a bad connotation. It means it's usually done for a manipulation or as a manipulation tactic. So love bombing is any time that we see in the beginning of a relationship, typically before you actually get to know someone, where there's this excessive like complimenting and lavish gifts and these grand gestures. Speaking of commitment, really way too soon in the relationship. So you just meet someone and all of a sudden they're talking about a future. They're giving you flowers. They're giving you excessive compliments. Their proximity to you, they always want to spend time with you. And it often feels like too much. In fact, people who are securely attached typically are very turned off by love bombing. It does not feel normal or safe to their nervous system. So if you are someone who is insecurely attached, you will fall prey to this much faster than someone who has secure attachment, who will be like, whoo, back up, hold on, and will put boundaries in place pretty quickly and ask for the relationship to slow down. So when we see someone that has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, who does love bombing, it is a very intentional reason that they do it. So the intent matters and the outcome matters. So these individuals will do it to control. So they're setting you up to have an emotional dependence on them, because then they can control your highs and your lows and how you feel and how you move throughout your relationship and whether or not they isolate you. So they do it with the intent of controlling and sometimes abuse. And they do it to create intermittent reinforcement eventually in the relationship. So the cycle of narcissistic personality disorder includes lots of love bombing, taking that love away and then giving it back after you sort of had a low, right? We call it hoovering, where they lure you back in with more love bombing. And that is because they know inherently that it creates intermittent reinforcement, which means that you become addicted. And so love bombing can often create addiction, especially for people who are anxiously attached. But up front, it is meant to disarm the partner so that later they can move in and grab for control. But you will see things that mimic or look like love bombing and maybe even are love bombing for some of the different insecure attachment styles. For example, the fearful avoidant, they deeply desire intimacy and connection. What happens in relationship is once they actually start to feel that connection, the brain goes into self-protective mode and they push their partner away because they crave intimacy, but they are deeply, deeply afraid of it. And so when they begin to recognize that they're invested in a relationship, then they tend to sort of pull back. So there's this push-pull constantly in relationship with a fearful avoidant. If you're unfamiliar, go back and look at some of my other videos where I get into the deep-rooted childhood issues that lead to this. But in the beginning of a relationship, because they deeply do desire to feel connected, but they aren't triggered yet into feeling unsafe in that connection, in the beginning, they can come on really strong with their partners. So there can be a lot of vulnerability, a lot of like movement towards commitment early in the relationship. They are very empathetic individuals who can almost know your needs before you do. So that can feel like them coming in, swooping in, and doing all of these things in a love bombing sort of way. It really is just how they are wired. And because they are so considerate and thoughtful, it may feel like love bombing. They may go above and beyond because they have this idea that what feels good to me is going to feel good to other people. And they also tend to be people pleasers. So one of the things that bites them in the butt later is they don't really understand how other people can't pour into them the way that they pour into other people. So if they do that early in a relationship and they're pouring in, and there's a lot of chemistry a lot of times in the beginning for a fearful avoidant, that can appear or feel like love bombing to someone who maybe is more secure or someone who leans more avoidant. But that chemistry, that fast moving, that empathy that can come across as like grand gestures if you're not used to someone being really thoughtful and seeing you and really understanding you very quickly and wanting to move towards commitment quickly. For a fearful avoidant, the intent and the outcome is not the same as someone who is a narcissist or abuser. They are not trained to control you for the sake of control. Now, later in relationships, they will control to gain safety because they don't feel safe in their own body or the relationship. But that is completely different. There's no intent to harm there. And they're not doing it for any malicious intent whatsoever. The anxious preoccupied can also do it. Anxious preoccupied individuals are anxiously attached individuals who thrive in relationship. They find their self-worth, their identity in the relationship, and so they are love addicts. So they will literally bend themselves into any shape, form, or size to make sure that they are everything that their partner wants and that they please their partner. They are always putting their partner's needs above their own. So in the beginning of a relationship, they can be too much for someone who is more avoidantly attached. It can feel very uncomfortable for someone who is securely attached. And that may also feel like love bombing if you have someone who is there constantly people pleasing you, doing whatever you want all the time, putting your needs above their own. But it's not. It is literally their own insecurity and fears that is driving them to do this people-pleasing behavior and become who it is that you want and need. And that is the thing with the insecure attached, people who are insecurely attached, is they are not doing this for control. They are doing this from a place of fear and insecurity and self-protection, not to harm. And both the fearful avoidant and the anxiously preoccupied will behave in this way to earn approval because of their low self-worth. And that can come across as love bombing. Lastly, we have the dismissive avoidant. They tend to do this less, but they can people sometimes think they've been love bombed by a DA because they do like a bait and switch. They will show one way and then they will pull back and show you something different. And what happens is in a long-term relationship, when there's commitment, expectation, closeness, intimacy, when they fear losing themselves in the relationship, their independence, their autonomy, and they worry about being enmeshed in the relationship, they will pull back. They will slowly pull back until you are left with breadcrumbs and essentially you're the entire one carrying the relationship. That is because of their childhood and they are deeply triggered by those things that I just mentioned. So early in a relationship, before they are triggered, they will show up really well. It may seem that they are being a little bit more vulnerable, but there's like a boundary to that. They're not going to let you all the way in. And it's not authentic. It's not who they really are. They really are triggered by vulnerability and connection. So they may feel more connected and more thoughtful and more caring and show up more and feel like they hold more space for you in the beginning. But that is not, it's because they haven't yet been triggered. So it's not actually who they are. So it's not love bombing. It's not an act. It's not them trying to like get you and then switch who they are. It's they simply haven't been triggered yet. And if you go back and you look at some of my videos on their childhood wounds, then that makes more sense why those things specifically trigger them, because they do not have any neural wiring or the makeup for someone who can be emotionally connected to other people. So it's easy for them to show up early in a relationship when things are more superficial, when there's not expectations, there's not talk of commitment. But then as you become more invested in the relationship, they tend to withdraw and retreat. They also really thrive on dopamine hits and novelty because it feels safer, because it doesn't require vulnerability. They don't have to be seen and exposed. And so those things may mean that they show up differently in the beginning of a relationship. But again, it's not love bombing. So there's a cycle that we see with narcissists where they do this intentionally and they sort of keep you trapped in this cycle where they will go to idealization first, then devaluation, and then discard. We don't see that with insecure attachment. That cycle does not continue to play out. Now, it may feel like love bombing with the DA because they are feel like they're all in and then they pull away. And then during that space, they get relief from all of the things that trigger them. So they may slowly start to lean back in after that, but that's not the same thing as hoovering. That's simply that they have escaped their triggers. And so they are able to show back up in that space for you until they are triggered again. But over time, even that space is not going to mean that they are able to keep leaning in, and they're not going to come with the grand gestures and the constant reassurance and the flattery and the gift giving and be able to read your mind before you need something and the same empathy. They're not going to come with that the same way that the narcissist has mastered those things. So there you have it. Insecurely attached individuals may appear to have some of the same traits as someone who is love bombing, but it is very different. The intent is different. The outcome is different. And there's not the goal to control the same way that you see with someone who is an abuser or someone who is a narcissist. And so be very careful whenever we talk about a certain attachment style being a narcissist based on these things, and understand there is a difference. If you are someone who is insecurely attached and you fall into this pattern and you've noticed you keep ending up with avoidance or people who are anxiously attached, that's what I do in my coaching program. I help you earn secure attachment so that those things feel so bad to your nervous system that you will immediately red flag those things and push them away. Securely attached individuals do not end up in situations where they are love bombed. You can do your healing work today so that you don't become a victim to such things.